Good and evil are terms that our society has been uncomfortable with for a long time. We're supposed to be in a rational and scientific age, and the language of the spiritual has been made to feel backward and low class. Angels, demons, holiness, and sin, these are relics of a bygone era. Language best left in the Dark Ages by a civilization moving towards scientific enlightenment. And this transition from the spiritual to the material has greatly benefited proponents of social change. For a long time now, science has been demystifying areas that had once been considered the domain of the sacred. The spiritual mysteries that seem to have been layered into every aspect of the natural world could now be explained with great predictability and reliability by material causes. Blood cells, germs, neurons, and chemicals replaced more spiritual forces. Eventually, this process escaped the realm of natural science and invaded every aspect of life. Business, human relationships, politics, and even eventually spirituality itself could be analyzed, deconstructed, and made more efficient by scientific analysis. The fact that the actual scientific method couldn't really be mapped onto sociology or politics hardly seemed to matter. Scientism had come to be seen as a symbol of status, a sign that your discipline was both modern and relevant. Scientific inquiry, or whatever facsimile of it your discipline could produce, was the only acceptable path to knowledge. This proved to be quite the boon to those looking to subvert the traditional social order. Long-held assumptions about the natural order that had been kept in place by the crumbling pillars of faith and custom could be deconstructed and laid bare. It turns out it's a lot easier to accept something that had been considered evil in previous ages if you move it out of the realm of the sacred and into the realm of the material. Sexual mores? Those are a product of a primitive, superstitious, and patriarchal people. It's just a natural process between two consenting rational actors. Just an exchange of genetic material between two highly advanced primates. Any rules placed on it outside of consent must be backwards and outdated. Differences between the sexes, when they're even acknowledged to exist in the first place, are simply the result of chemicals or organs that can be swapped out at will, like parts of a car that you want to rebuild. The idea that the body would inform the identity was a thing of the past. The identity would now shape the body in its own image, which would look curiously like what movies, social media, and marketing told it to look like. This deconstruction, this transfer to the world of the material, made commodification far easier as well. Relationships which had once been seen as sacred in nature, entailing important duties and rituals, could be reduced to their constituent components. They could be quantified and carefully cataloged, having an economic value assigned to each function. And unfortunately, due to the nature of human appetites, with crass commodification, sexualization is never too far behind. Scientism had allowed the demolition of all boundaries, and every sphere of life, every relationship, was now fungible. Social taboos were a quaint idea of the distant past, no longer posing a barrier to modern scientific man. That small voice that used to warn you when you were crossing the line could be safely ignored, just some vestigial part of the lizard brain soon to be discarded. This sterile, scientific conversion of the world had made comfortable many things that would have been considered evil in a previous age, and modern man thought himself far too complicated to ever have to trouble himself with such primitive concerns. But then a funny thing happened. The same social forces that had been using scientism to push morality to the bleeding edge now seem ready to discard it for a more spiritual tone. It looked like science may have lost its utility to the social deconstructionists, hit the natural limits of its ability to facilitate their agenda. The rigid, factual analysis wasn't flexible enough to continue the progressive march, and the new emerging forces of wokeness seem willing to return to a more spiritual approach in order to continue the leftward journey. This was profoundly uncomfortable for those who had been trained to believe that cold rationality was the only acceptable mode of truth-seeking. But there was a far more disturbing problem just around the corner. As more and more of the transgressive practices which had been legitimized under scientism took on the tones of spirituality and religion, they started to appear more, well, evil. It was one thing when they were treated as the individual choices of another autonomous primate, something one could ignore and keep doing their own thing. It was very different to have these things treated like acts of worship, sacred and venerated rituals requiring sufficient expressions of exuberant agreement from all those blessed enough to observe them. As long as the discussion stayed bogged down in medication, hormones, surgery, and synapses, one might be able to intellectualize and normalize the gender transition of children. But when you see the return of the spiritual, when you see the process treated like a sacred ritual, it becomes harder and harder to not recognize child sacrifice when you see it. As society slowly moves away from its reliance on scientism and back towards a version of the sacred, an increasing number of people who were trained to never take religion seriously are slowly realizing that they have allowed an evil they cannot name. While they slept in a warm cocoon of secularity, feeding on a constant diet of the comforting lie that is moral neutrality, dark and ancient things returned, and many are awakening to the fact that the small and cold worldview they were handed has not prepared them for what comes next. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and click like. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is a great time to do so. If you would like to support my work, like the incredible people whose names are currently appearing on screen, you can follow the link below the video in the description to my subscribe star. That's also where you'll find links to my Twitter, my Odyssey channel, my Rumble channel, and the merch store. I want to stop and say thanks to all of you for subscribing and supporting this channel. It's amazing what's happened. It's been amazing to see it grow. I'm so excited for what comes next, and I want to wish you and your family a great Thanksgiving. I really hope that we all stop and take time to appreciate the people around us and the gifts that have been given to us. With everything going on in the world right now, it can be really easy for us to forget what truly matters. But I hope this time of Thanksgiving to God with your friends and your family is a real blessing to you, because I know for me, these are the things that make everything worth it. Thanks for watching, guys, and as always, I'll talk to you next time.